I want you to imagine, just for a second, that you are on a first date.
Oh boy. Setting the scene.
Right. You are sitting across the table, the ice in your drink is slowly melting, and the person sitting across from you is really, really trying to impress you.
Which is, I mean, it's a universal human experience, and usually a very uncomfortable one.
So uncomfortable.
The air just gets thick with that specific kind of desperate tension, you know?
Exactly. And in the normal world, people try to impress you by, I don't know, subtly dropping hints about their recent promotion.
Or maybe they casually mentioned that they ran a half marathon last month.
Yeah, or they make sure you see the logo on their car keys.
Right, the standard, mildly annoying stuff.
But imagine if instead of doing any of that normal stuff, your date leans in, looks you dead in the eye, and starts desperately name-dropping their exes.
Which is universally considered the ultimate social faux pas. That is the moment you politely excuse yourself to the restroom and just climb out the window.
A massive red flag. But wait, because in this scenario, it gets so much weirder.
Oh, it gets worse.
Much worse. They aren't just bringing up, like, an accountant they dated a few years ago or a barista from their neighborhood.
Right.
They are telling you with absolute, unblinking sincerity that their ex-girlfriends include ancient Greek goddesses
Oh, wow.
and Broadway legends and scandalous Renaissance aristocrats. They are looking at you and saying, yeah, I used to date the Queen of Sheba, but honestly, she just wasn't as great as you.
It completely bypasses normal romantic boasting at that point. I mean,
Yeah.
it enters a realm of pure, unadulterated, almost mathematical absurdity.
And that incredibly bizarre, completely overwrought first date energy is exactly what we are unpacking today. Welcome to episode 58 of Porter-Pedia.
So glad to be here.
This is a show where we explore the world, the work, and the incredibly colorful life of Cole Porter. We are so thrilled you are joining us today because this is actually the second in a very special series.
Yes, we were examining the highly specific, sometimes completely baffling references used in Cole Porter's legendary list songs.
And they are legendary for a reason.
They really are marvels of lyrical engineering. I mean, calling them songs almost feels insufficient. They are more like, well, they're comedic endurance tests for the performer.
Absolutely. Now, you might remember that in our previous exploration, we covered the theme of farming in Porter's work.
Which was a blast.
It was so fun. If you haven't checked that one out yet, you absolutely need to give it a listen. It is wild how much agricultural humor one man could fit into a tuxedo.
Truly.
But today, our focal point is the brilliant 1950 song, They Couldn't Compare to You. This is from the musical Out of This World.
A fantastic show.
And just to tease the future a bit, upcoming explorations in this series are going to look at absolute classics like I'm Throwing a Ball Tonight, The Physician, and several others.
It is going to be a fantastic journey through some of the most dense, delightful lyrics ever written for the American stage.
I cannot wait. And I have to say this right at the top. If you enjoy this type of cultural excavation, if you love peeling back the layers of these incredibly witty lyrics to see how the clockwork functions, you absolutely must buy the book Porter-Pedia.
Highly recommend it.
It is the namesake of our show, and it explains every single reference Cole Porter ever dropped. We are talking over 1,300 references in total.
It's massive.
It's an essential companion for any true fan. The link is right there in the episode description, so definitely go grab it.
It truly acts as a decoder ring. Without, I mean, half of Porter's genius just flies right over your head.
Totally. Okay, so let's set the table for today. We have an incredible stack of sources in front of us. We've got a comprehensive analytical article that breaks down the mechanics of this 1950 song.
And we have the complete original lyrics.
Yes, plus a wonderfully detailed historical reference glossary. Our mission today is to figure out exactly how Cole Porter took a mountain of historical knowledge, like the kind of stuff you'd find dusty in a university library, and turned it into toe-tapping rhythm.
Right, how he transformed historical fame into punchlines.
Exactly. We want to see how he basically created a 1950 cultural time capsule out of this extravagantly over-argued love song.
And over-argued is the perfect term, because there are songs that simply describe love, and then there are songs that attempt to mathematically, empirically prove it.
Which is a bold strategy.
Very bold. Porter chooses the latter approach here, and he mounts a case so completely over the top that the sheer weight of the argument becomes the comedy.
But I have to ask you, looking at this premise, this guy sitting there listing off all these impossible mythological conquests to rue somebody, is this song actually a genuine declaration of love?
That's the big question.
Right. Or is it just an excuse for Porter to show off how impossibly cultured and smart his protagonist is? Because to me, it feels a bit like a magic trick where the magician is screaming, "Look how good I am at magic."
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
And that tension is exactly what makes the song brilliant. On its surface, yes, it functions within the plot as a declaration of love. But beneath that, our analytical article points out that it's a deeply satirical commentary. It's gently mocking the very idea of comparative conquest in romance. In Porter's world, love is rarely innocent or straightforward. It is highly theatrical, it is incredibly self-aware, and it's often slightly ridiculous.
Yeah.
But to really understand why, we have to look at the specific character singing it.
Okay, so set the scene for us. It's 1950. The musical is out of this world. Who is actually singing this?
The singer is the character of Mercury,
Wait, Mercury? Like the ancient Roman messenger god with the little wings on his shoes?
the very same.
Okay.
But in the context of this 1950 Broadway show, he isn't playing a majestic deity delivering edicts from Mount Olympus.
No.
No, he is acting as a sort of cosmopolitan boulevardier, a fast-talking, charming man about town. He is surveying the entire history of feminine allure across thousands of years, only to dismiss all of it in favor of this one singular beloved he is singing to.
So he isn't just claiming to have loved widely. He is literally producing an itemized receipt.
It's exactly an itemized receipt of thousands of years of history.
And what a receipt it is. Let's look at the opening refrain, because I feel like the very first two locations he mentions set up the structural joke for the entire 4 minutes of the song.
They absolutely do.
Mercury claims that he has played many a maid from the heights of Valhalla to Kalamazoo.
It is a deceptively simple opening.
Yeah.
But you're right, it establishes Porter's exact comedic method.
Right.
Think about what he is juxtaposing here, just geographically and conceptually. On one hand, you have Valhalla.
Right, which is Norse mythology. It's the grand, epic Hall of the Slain, where warriors who die in battle are taken by the Valkyries.
Yes.
It's majestic, it's bloody, it's very Wagnerian. It evokes this massive scale of heroism and the afterlife.
Precisely. It is the absolute pinnacle of high-stakes, mythological grandeur. And then, in the exact same breath, without even pausing, he rhymes it with Kalamazoo.
A very real, perfectly lovely, but completely unglamorous Midwestern city in Michigan.
Right. The whiplash is the joke. Porter is taking the exalted, epic realm of the gods and flattening it against a mundane American municipality.
Yeah.
By placing them side by side, he creates this comic thud. The speaker's experience supposedly spans both the divine afterlife and a random stop on a Midwestern train line. And he treats both with the exact same level of casual indifference.
It's like saying, I've dined at the finest Michelin star restaurants in Paris and also the Arby's on 4th Street.
Exactly. The contrast does all the heavy lifting.
And that sets the stage perfectly because right after that, we transition into the patter section of the song. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, what exactly is a patter section?
So a patter song, or the patter section of a song, is characterized by a moderately fast to very fast tempo, with a rapid succession of rhythmic patterns.
Okay.
Every single syllable is assigned to a specific note, and the lyrics are usually incredibly dense with multi-syllabic words and internal rhymes. It requires massive breath control and precision from the singer.
Got it. So the music speeds up, the lyrics get incredibly dense, and Mercury starts off his list, surprisingly locally. He sings, "After playing the local sirens who resided in my environs."
I love that pairing. Notice the word environs there.
Yeah.
He's talking about the women in his immediate neighborhood, but he elevates it with this mock heroic, almost clinical diction. It's the language of a surveyor mapping a territory or a conquering general, not a guy just going on dates in his zip code.
But he doesn't stay local for long. He immediately escalates. He says he decided to learn Cupid's trickery, started cruising, and found the muses so amusing that I even got a kick out of terpsichore.
Oh, this is brilliance.
Now, I know the muses, they're the Greek goddesses of inspiration, but I'm going to be honest with you, I would need the Porter-Pedia book to tell me who terpsichore is off the top of my head.
And that's exactly why this analysis is so fun. So there are 9 muses in Greek mythology, each presiding over a different art or science. Terpsichore is specifically the muse associated with dance and the dramatic chorus. In classical antiquity, these figures are deeply revered. You pray to them before creating art. They are the divine source of all human creativity.
And Porter's grand poetic statement about the divine embodiment of dances, I got a kick out of terpsichore.
Exactly. The high culture reverence is instantly punctured by casual, dismissive slang.
It's so funny to me because combining high and low culture feels very modern. Like you scroll through your phone today and you'll see a meme that takes a 15th century Renaissance painting of a Madonna and slaps modern internet slang over it.
Yes, very common now.
That juxtaposition is basically the entire internet sense of humor. But we are talking about 1950 here. How shocking or refreshing would this comedic flattening have been to a Broadway audience back then?
Well, shocking might be the wrong word, but it was incredibly intellectually exhilarating. You have to remember the makeup of a Broadway audience in 1950.
Right.
They were, generally speaking, very cosmopolitan, urban, and educated. They had a solid foundation in the classics, but they were also steeped in contemporary celebrity culture and nightlife.
So they got both sides of the joke.
Exactly. What Porter was doing was deeply flattering to their intelligence. He didn't stop to explain the joke. He expected the audience to know exactly who Terpsichore was so that they could instantly appreciate the whiplash of dismissing her with a phrase like, got a kick out of.
He was rewarding their cultural fluency in real time.
Yes, precisely.
And he expects them to keep up because he does not slow down. After Terpsichore, he immediately moves on to Calypso. The lyric says, "After her, I met Calypso, who was definitely a dipso." Now let's lay the groundwork here so the joke lands. Who is Calypso?
Calypso is a formidable nymph from Homer's Odyssey, and we really shouldn't underestimate her. She lives on the island of Ogygia, and she detains the great hero Odysseus there for 7 years.
7 years.
7 years. She's immensely powerful. She even offers Odysseus immortality if he will just stay with her forever. She represents a massive, terrifying obstacle to heroic destiny, a figure of deep, primal longing in captivity.
So she is essentially a demigod who can bend the greatest heroes of the ancient world to her will. And Cole Porter rates that she was definitely a dipso, which for our listeners today is 1950s shorthand for a dipsomaniac, an alcoholic.
Yep.
He just completely kneecaps her mythological dignity for the sake of a rhyme.
He does. He takes this figure of epic mythological captivity and replaces her power with, well, cocktail party gossip. He isn't denying that the myth happened. He is just aggressively trivializing it.
Right. The implication is, sure, she kept Odysseus on an island for 7 years, but honestly, she was just a messy drunk who couldn't handle her liquor.
Exactly. It's brilliant.
I love that so much. It's so disrespectful in the best way. And then, without even taking a breath, we get, "Then I fled to Big Brunhilde. She was German."
This one is structurally perfect. Brunhilde is the imposing Valkyrie from Richard Wagner's Ring Cycle operas. And when we talk about Wagner, we are talking about massive scale.
Right. Operas that take, 15 hours to perform over 4 nights?
Exactly. Brunhilde represents earth-shattering operatic intensity, massive tragedy, and overwhelming romantic force. I mean, her story literally ends with her riding her horse into a funeral pyre to cleanse the world.
A literal fiery apocalypse of emotion.
Yes. And Porter dismisses all 15 hours of that heavy German romanticism in a single exhausted breath. He basically says, yeah, she was huge, she was German, so I ran away.
It's as if the most powerful romantic force in 19th century music drama is just a bad Tinder date he had to sneak out the bathroom window to escape.
That's exactly the vibe.
And he follows that up with a line that honestly borders on blasphemy for the time. After snitching Eve from Adam,
Oh, yeah.
he takes the foundational story of human creation in the Abrahamic religions, the literal origin of humanity in the Garden of Eden, and collapses it into the language of petty theft. Snitching Eve, like he pocketed a lighter he found on a coffee table.
It perfectly illustrates what our sources describe as the satirical commentary running beneath the song.
Yeah.
The sheer excess of this list is what undermines its sincerity. Mercury is crossing myth with history, he's blurring religious text with fiction, and collapsing thousands of years of human existence into a few casual evenings out.
It brings me back to that idea of the padded resume. It's like a guy handing you a resume where he claims he optimized the company's supply chain. Also, he invented the wheel. He won a Grammy for Best New Artist. And by the way, he is secretly Batman.
Exactly.
At a certain point, the lie is so massive, it stops being a lie and becomes a performance art piece. But I'm curious about the mechanics of writing something like this. Does trivializing these epic figures, like calling Calypso a dipso or treating Brunhilde like an exhausting tourist, does that require more respect and intimate knowledge of the original source material or less?
That's a great question.
Like, is Porter just being lazy and picking names that rhyme?
It is definitely not lazy. I would argue it requires vastly more respect and intimate knowledge of the material. To effectively satirize something, you have to understand its structural load-bearing walls.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You have to know exactly what makes the thing important in order to tear it down effectively. Porter knows exactly why Calypso is supposed to be terrifying to ancient Greeks, which is why calling her a sloppy drunk lands so perfectly.
Right.
If he didn't understand the heavy, ponderous gravity of Wagner's operas, the joke of waving Brunhilde away as just some big German wouldn't have any comedic friction. The comedy is entirely dependent on the audience and the writer sharing a deep reverence for the original material.
Uh-huh.
You have to know the rules to break them this spectacularly.
Okay, here is where it gets really interesting to me. Because Porter doesn't just stay in the ancient world or the realm of high classical art. He brings the timeline aggressively forward into his own present day.
Yes, he does.
Right after casually stealing Eve from Adam, Mercury sings, "I attended Call Me Madam," and shortly began to nestle Ethel Merman.
It is a spectacular pivot. In one line, he folds contemporary Broadway itself into the mythology he is building.
And we have to give context here, because Call Me Madam wasn't a myth. It was a massive, real-life hit Broadway musical that was actually playing in 1950, the exact same year the song was written.
Right.
And it starred Ethel Merman, who was the absolute undisputed queen of the Broadway belters. She was a living legend.
She was a contemporary type. Everyone in that audience knew exactly who Ethel Merman was. And Porter playfully distorts her first name from Ethel to Essel just to force it to rhyme with the word Nestle.
The audacity of that distortion is so charming.
It really is.
But wait, think about the layered joke he's making just by sequencing the lyrics this way. He is placing Ethel Merman, a woman who was probably physically performing in a theater 3 blocks away on the night the song premiered, right next to the biblical Eve.
Yes.
He is equating a loud, brassy, contemporary stage actress with the mother of all humanity.
Which proves a central thesis about Porter's worldview. To him, fame is the ultimate currency. It doesn't matter if you are a biblical figure, a Norse myth, or a Broadway star with your name in lights on 45th Street. If you are famous, you are flattened to fodder for the list.
And from there, the song takes us on this whirlwind tour of nightlife, glamour, and scandal. He moves on to Scheherazade. He says, "I admired the silken body of the cheek Scheherazade."
Yes.
Now, Scheherazade is the legendary storyteller of 1001 Nights. Her entire historical brand is her intellect. She saves her own life and the lives of countless other women by weaving these incredible, endless narratives so the king won't execute her.
A woman whose mind literally saves her life. But Mercury, he doesn't care about her narrative ingenuity. He completely bypasses her world-changing intellect to purely appreciate her silken body.
Oh, typical.
Right. He reduces a literary heroine to pure physical appreciation. It's shallow, it's arrogant, and it fits his character perfectly.
And he follows that with Lady Godiva, saying he became her lord. Now, the history of Lady Godiva is that she supposedly rode a horse naked through the streets of Coventry to protest the oppressive taxes her husband was inflicting on the poor. It's a story of political protest.
But by claiming he became her lord, Porter allows Mercury to flirt with the very suggestive erotic imagery of a naked woman on horseback while technically hiding behind a respectable historical anecdote.
It's very cheeky, very sophisticated smut.
Exactly.
But then the tone shifts and gets surprisingly dark just for a second. Mercury sings, "After that, I staged an orgy for some friends of Lucretia Borgia."
Let's unpack Lucretia Borgia, because I feel like modern listeners might not grasp just how heavy this reference is.
Lucretia Borgia is a fascinating inclusion. She lived during the Italian Renaissance. She was the daughter of Pope Alexander VI, which, frankly, tells you everything you need to know about the corruption of the era.
Yeah, that's wild. She was a central figure in the infamous Borgia family. For centuries, her name was virtually synonymous with political intrigue, rumors of incest, and most notably, poison. Whether the historical rumors are completely true or not, to a 1950s audience, she is an emblem of terrifying Renaissance darkness and murder.
Right. She's basically a mafia princess of the 15th century, and Porter turns her into a casual party hostess.
Yes.
He gives this terrifying woman a cute little nickname, Lucretia Borgia, and says he threw an orgy for her friends. He converts historical notoriety and suspected murder into a fun theme for a Tuesday night party. It is so unbelievably flippant.
And look exactly where that party ends up. The very next line is, and ended up at the Stork with Fanny Ward.
The Stork Club.
Yes, the Stork Club was a real, incredibly famous New York City nightclub. In the 1940s and 50s, it was the absolute epicenter of celebrity, high society, and gossip in America. If you were a movie star, a politician, or a mobster, you wanted to be seen at the Stork Club.
Wow.
And he claims he's there with Fannie Ward.
Ooh, I had to look up in the sources. She was an American stage and silent film actress, right?
No, she was. She starred in a famous 1915 film called The Cheat. But by 1950, she was mostly famous for her seemingly ageless appearance. She was a living legend of glamour who had simply refused to fade away.
So if we trace the geography of just those 4 lines, Porter is taking the legendary storyteller of the Middle East, an 11th century English noblewoman, a Renaissance poisoner, and a silent film star, and he is mapping all of them directly onto the geography of mid-century New York nightlife.
It's totally wild.
Antiquity and Manhattan are coexisting perfectly in the same VIP booth.
It creates a surreal, timeless universe where all of human history is just one long, glamorous cocktail party.
Which naturally leads me to a thought experiment, because culture shifts, right? The people who were instantly recognizable in 1950 aren't always recognizable today.
Very true.
If Cole Porter were writing this exact song today, in our current cultural landscape, who would be the modern equivalents occupying that VIP booth at the Stork Club next to a resurrected Lucretia Borgia? Who has that specific mix of untouchable glamour, slight scandal, and massive cultural weight that Porter loved to play with?
Oh, that is a fantastic question. If we were mapping this onto today, the modern equivalent of the Stork Club is probably the Met Gala or maybe an exclusive after-party at the Oscars.
Oh.
And in that VIP booth, if you need someone who has completely redefined contemporary fame, commerce, and scandal, you'd likely see someone like Kim Kardashian.
Oh, I can completely hear a Cole Porter lyric rhyming something ridiculous with Kardashian. Like, I thought it was a passing passion until I met a real Kardashian. It writes itself.
It does. Or you would need a modern pop monolith whose cultural footprint is almost mythological in its own right. Someone like Taylor Swift or Beyoncé. Because to replace these historical figures, you need modern figures whose mere names instantly evoke a complete ecosystem of gossip, reverence, and critique. Porter played with icons, so you would need today's undisputed icons.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
Let's look at how Porter subverts power dynamics, though. Because he doesn't just name-drop these women, he actively rewrites their histories to serve the joke. Let's talk about Penelope.
Yes. In the song, Mercury sings, "Well, I raised a bit of hell with Penelope."
Now, anyone who had to read Homer's Odyssey in high school knows Penelope. She is the wife of Odysseus. And her entire mythological brand, her one defining characteristic for 3,000 years, is fidelity.
Right.
She famously resists hundreds of aggressive, wealthy suitors for 20 straight years while her husband is lost at sea. She weaves a burial shroud every day and unweaves it every night just to stall them. She is the ultimate symbol of the faithful, untouchable wife.
And Porter clearly delights in overturning that hard-earned reputation entirely. By claiming he casually raised a bit of hell with her, the irony is unmistakable. The joke is that the woman who famously resisted everyone for 2 decades apparently took one look at Mercury and just gave up.
Wow.
Porter loves taking the absolute defining trait of a historical figure and turning it upside down for a laugh.
And he does the exact same thing right after that with the Vestal Virgins. He sings, "After quieting all my urgings for several Vestal Virgins."
The Vestal Virgins were priestesses in ancient Rome, dedicated to the goddess Vesta. And their absolute defining characteristic, it is literally in their title, is that they were sworn to strict celibacy.
Yeah.
If they broke that vow, the punishment in ancient Rome was to be buried alive. So claiming them as a romantic conquest is completely, fundamentally impossible.
Which is exactly the punchline. The joke only works if you know enough about Roman history to know that Mercury is lying through his teeth. It's a joke built entirely on the audience knowing it's historically inaccurate.
Exactly. The boast becomes comic hyperbole. The impossibility is the joke.
But I have to say, my absolute favorite power reversal in the entire song involves a real 20th century person, Gypsy Rose Lee. Mercury says he put on a strip for Gypsy Rose Lee.
That line is structurally perfect. Let's give the context for anyone who doesn't know. Gypsy Rose Lee was a legendary burlesque performer, a witty writer, and arguably the most famous striptease artist in American history. She was synonymous with the art of the striptease.
Right. So the expectation, if Mercury is this great, overpowering seducer of women, is that he would seduce her, or at the very least, that he would sit in the front row and watch her perform. But Porter flips the dynamic.
He does.
Mercury says he put on a strip for her, he sacrifices his own dignity, takes off his own clothes, and becomes the performer, putting the most famous stripper in America in the audience to judge his routine.
It is a brilliant shift in the power dynamic. It shows that Mercury is willing to make a fool of himself, to completely surrender his machismo, if it serves the comedy of the song.
And speaking of sacrificing dignity, let's look at the rapid-fire insults that come next, because Porter just starts mowing down historical icons for the sake of a rhyme. Though I like the Queen of Sheba, she was mentally an amoeba.
The Queen of Sheba, I mean, a legendary exotic monarch from ancient Yemen or Ethiopia. She famously traveled to Jerusalem with unimaginable wealth just to test the wisdom of King Solomon with incredibly complex riddles. She is a symbol of immense intellect, wealth, and geopolitical power.
Yeah.
And Porter rhymes her with amoeba, calling her a single-celled organism just to finish the couplet.
Is that genius or is that just a cheap shot?
Well, it's genius because it's a cheap shot. The audacity of calling a legendary geopolitical mastermind stupid just to hit a rhyme scheme is where the comedy lives. It's the sheer disrespect of the form over the content.
He does it again with Beatrice d'Este. As for Beatrice d'Este, she was a pest and far too chesty. Who was she?
Beatrice d'Este was the Duchess of Milan in the 15th century. She was a massive Renaissance patron of the arts. She practically funded Leonardo da Vinci. She was renowned for her refined beauty, her fashion, and her massive diplomatic influence before dying tragically at the age of 21. She is high Renaissance culture personified.
And Porter reduces her to chesty, which is basically a 1950s schoolboy insult. It completely undoes her historical stature. Then we get Poppaea. As for the passionate wife of Nero, my reaction was frankly zero.
Poppaea Sabina was Roman Emperor Nero's ambitious, infamous second wife. Her life was nothing but scandal, murder, kicking people to death, and dramatic excess. And Mercury says she bored him to tears. He takes ancient blood-soaked scandal and reduces it to a yawn.
And then the modern fusion, Circe. She is the sorceress from the Odyssey who literally turns men into pigs. She is a figure of terrifying sensual danger. And Mercury sings, "She was so hot I hollered for mercy."
That might be the most modern-sounding line in the whole song. It fuses ancient, terrifying myth with mid-century street slang. He collapses thousands of years of history into a single, sweaty exclamation.
It reminds me of the modern concept of roasting, like those celebrity roasts on television where absolutely nothing is off limits, and the crueler it is, the funnier it is. Porter is using the rigid mathematical structure of rhyming couplets to force these legendary, powerful women into tiny, undignified little boxes. I have to ask, does the rhythm of the music act as a kind of comedic weapon here?
Oh, absolutely. The rhythm is the engine of the comedy. We talked about the patter song format earlier. Let's look at the mechanics of how Porter writes this. He uses anapestic and dactylic meters, these bouncy, relentless, galloping rhythms. The lines just tumble forward with alliteration and internal rhymes.
So it's moving so fast you can't even process the insult.
Exactly. He traps the audience in a musical roller coaster.
Mm-hmm.
If he gave you a slow, thoughtful ballad, you'd have time to sit back and think, wait a minute. The Queen of Sheba wasn't an amoeba, she was a brilliant monarch.
Yeah.
But at 120 beats per minute, your critical brain shuts off. You don't have time to object. You are swept from Greek myth to Renaissance Italy so quickly that the audacity of the insults bypasses your logic and goes straight to your funny bone. The velocity is the joke.
That makes perfect sense. So what does this all mean when we reach the final segment of the patter? Because Porter unleashes an absolute avalanche of names here. It is a total sweep of history. Let me just look at the lyrics for this final sprint. He starts with Galatea.
The mythological statue that the sculptor Pygmalion brought to life. The ultimate romantic passive ideal.
Right, and he immediately follows the ultimate romantic ideal with mean Medea,
who famously murdered her own children out of revenge when her husband left her. Quite the pivot from a romantic statue.
A terrifying pivot. Then he jumps to Sappho, the ancient lyric poet from the island of Lesbos, a symbol of literary prestige. And then he rhymes Nefertiti,
the Egyptian queen, whose iconic bust had only been rediscovered in 1912, making her a relatively new ancient celebrity for the 1950s audience.
He rhymes Nefertiti with a perfect sweetie. The ruler of the Nile is just a sweetie. And from ancient Egypt, he jumps straight to Gay Mae West, the living, breathing 1950s embodiment of self-aware sexual wit. Then to Cinderella, a literal fairy tale character. Then to Isabella of Spain,
the immensely powerful queen who funded Christopher Columbus and built a global empire.
And from the Queen of Spain, we go to Lola Montez. Who is she?
Lola Montez was a scandalous 19th century Irish-born dancer and courtesan who faked a Spanish identity. She had a notorious kingdom-shaking affair with the King of Bavaria. She was the ultimate scandalous celebrity of the 1840s.
And he ends this sprint with that damn Calamity Jane, the rough-hewn, sharpshooting legend of the American West. It is dizzying, as the article points out. It is a suite from palace to prairie, from myth to melodrama. He's leaving no stone unturned. And just when you think he can't possibly top this list, he sets up a mock dilemma. He says, "When betwixt Nell Gwyn and Anne Boleyn, I was forced to make my choice."
This is a wonderfully specific historical contrast. Nell Gwyn was a celebrated, witty, charming comedic actress who became the longtime mistress of King Charles II in the 1600s. She was lively and famously beloved by the public. Anne Boleyn, on the other hand, was the second wife of King Henry VIII in the 1500s, whose life ended in a dramatic, world-altering execution for treason. You have the ultimate lively mistress versus the ultimate doomed queen.
And Mercury says he was paralyzed trying to choose between them. So what does he do while he's stressing over these two English icons? He sings, "I became so confused I was even amused and abused" by Peggy Joyce.
Which is the perfect punchline to interrupt the royal dilemma. Peggy Hopkins Joyce was a Ziegfeld Follies girl. She was a contemporary socialite famous for her extravagant lifestyle, her endless string of wealthy husbands, and her massive diamond collection. She was an absolute tabloid fixture in the 1920s and 30s.
So while he's trying to decide between 16th century royalty, a 20th century Ziegfeld showgirl comes along and just walks all over him. It's that power reversal again.
It perfectly illustrates that even the act of decision-making has become a source of comic overload for him. The centuries are colliding.
And he wraps up the list with three final names. Melisande, the tragic symbolist heroine from Maeterlinck's play, whom he reimagines as just a platinum blonde. Then Aurora, the Roman goddess of the dawn. And finally, Pandora.
Yes, Pandora, the first woman in Greek mythology who famously opened a jar or a box, releasing all the evils, diseases, and miseries into the world.
And Mercury sings Pandora, who let me open her box.
Is the most obvious, winking double entendre imaginable. Porter takes a foundational myth about the origin of human suffering and turns it into a dirty joke to close out the patter section. It is structurally flawless.
It's so naughty and so perfect, but there is one last piece of linguistic acrobatics I want to talk about. After the patter ends, we hit the second refrain. The chorus of girls sings that Mercury has played many a maid, and Mercury replies, "I've thoroughly pitched the woo from Gallipipalippi to Tippecanoe." Let's break down those locations, because I feel like this is where the song gets incredibly cynical.
This is exactly where we see history completely dissolving into phonetics. Gallipipalippi is clearly a comic, bouncing distortion of Gallipoli.
And Gallipoli was not a fun place. The Gallipoli campaign was a very real, very disastrous World War I military campaign where Allied forces tried to seize the Dardanelles from the Ottoman Empire. Hundreds of thousands of men were killed or wounded. It was a generation-defining tragedy. And Tippecanoe refers to the Battle of Tippecanoe in 1811, a pivotal and bloody clash between U.S. forces and Native American warriors.
These are sites of immense historical trauma and violence. They are battlefields.
Exactly. Which makes me wonder, does Porter care about the history of these battles at all? Or has the trauma of history just become raw material for his phonetic playground?
It is entirely the latter, and that is the dark genius of it. Porter does not care about the geopolitical implications of the Ottoman Empire or the tragedy of American westward expansion in this context. He only cares about the bounce of the syllables in the singer's mouth. Gallipipalippi has this inherently bouncy, ridiculous, exotic sound. Tippecanoe provides a rhythmic, almost patriotic-sounding echo that happens to rhyme perfectly with woo and you. He is weaponizing historical trauma purely for its mouthfeel. The tragedy is erased. Only the rhythm remains.
It is breathtakingly cynical, but musically you can't deny it works. Which brings us to a really important point. The song as a cultural time capsule. Let's think about the audience sitting in the velvet seats of that theater in 1950.
When we look at this song as a whole, it reveals so much about the cultural consciousness of that specific era. Porter clearly expected his audience to recognize these figures. He expected them to know the difference between the operatic weight of Brunhilde and the tabloid fame of Peggy Joyce. And, more importantly, he expected them to relish the collision of those two worlds.
It implies a world where education and entertainment weren't strictly separated into different silos. Cosmopolitan fluency, knowing your Greek myths, your European history, and your Broadway gossip, was a sign of true sophistication.
Exactly. It shows that in 1950s Broadway, fame was the ultimate equalizer. Whether your fame came from being a mythological goddess worshipped by the ancients, or a burlesque dancer performing down the street, you occupied the exact same cultural headspace for this audience.
But the article we're looking at also points out a downside to this incredible density of references. It calls the song a cultural fossil. Because today, if you don't have a guide like, say, the amazing Porter-Pedia book we mentioned earlier, the song can feel a bit obscure. We don't all instinctively know who Peggy Joyce or Fanny Ward are anymore.
That's very true. The names that were instantly recognizable have faded, requiring explanation. But that is exactly what makes the song so valuable historically. It perfectly preserves the specific obsessions, the wit, and the values of the public imagination at that exact moment in time. It's like finding a mosquito trapped in amber.
Let's bring it all back to the emotional core of the song, if it even has one. The paradox of this entire romantic declaration. Mercury spends 4 minutes listing over 40 incredible, legendary women. By the time the final refrain hits, the argument has completely collapsed under its own weight, hasn't it?
Completely. The listener, both the woman he is singing to and us in the audience, no longer believes the romantic claim that they couldn't compare to you. But crucially, we don't disbelieve it because it's a lie. We disbelieve it because it is too extravagantly, impossibly true. The speaker has loved everyone, everywhere, across all of time. The sheer volume of evidence destroys the premise of monogamous devotion.
It's exactly like a magician showing you how a trick is done. He walks you through every false bottom, every hidden wire, every palmed card. But the explanation is so charming, so rhythmic, and so overwhelmingly entertaining that you don't even care that the magic isn't real. You are just mesmerized by the performance of the explanation. But it makes me wonder, fundamentally, does this make Cole Porter a cynic about love? Or is he just a supreme realist about the theater?
Here is where I think we find the central insight of the song. Porter is a realist about human nature, expressed through the machinery of the theater. Porter understood something fundamental. We all construct narratives about our pasts to impress the people in our present. Mercury is just doing it on a cosmic mythological scale. Porter isn't necessarily saying that love isn't real. He is saying that the language of romance is inherently theatrical. It is a performance. And if sincerity is flat, if sincerity is boring, then the only way to truly express overwhelming emotion is through overwhelming artifice. That is the genius of Cole Porter. If you are going to perform your love, you might as well put on a spectacular show.
Wow. So they couldn't compare to you lands not as sincere love, but as pure, unadulterated style. The artifice is the emotion.
Exactly. It is desire transformed into performance.
Okay, let's bring this all together. What Cole Porter did with They Couldn't Compare to You is nothing short of alchemy. He took a dizzying array of over 40 historical, mythic, literary, and pop culture women from the biblical Eve to the burlesque queen Gypsy Rose Lee, and he smashed them together to craft the ultimate, over-argued love song. He proved that in his world, love is never innocent. It is always theatrical, it is deeply self-aware, and it is built on a foundation of spectacular, weaponized wit.
It is an absolute masterclass in turning encyclopedic knowledge into toe-tapping rhythm.
It truly is. And it leaves me with one final, lingering question for you to mull over as you go about your day. If an artist were to sit down and write a modern version of They Couldn't Compare to You exactly a century from now, let's say in the year 2124, analyzing the cultural icons of our present day, which of our current celebrities, politicians, or viral stars would be immortalized alongside the ancient gods? And perhaps more terrifyingly, which of the people dominating our news feeds today would be completely, utterly forgotten, requiring a futuristic version of Porter-Pedia just to understand the joke?
It is a deeply humbling thought to consider who will survive the rhyme scheme of history.
Keep that in mind the next time you are trying to impress someone on a date. Maybe skip the resume padding. Thank you for exploring the mind of Cole Porter with us today. Keep questioning, keep discovering, and keep enjoying the music.